The parking lot behind the Burbank studio was empty except for 3 cars and a catering truck that had not moved in 2 hours. Inside, past the fire door and down a corridor that smelled of old carpet and electrical tape, there was a gymnasium that Warner Bros. Kept for on-lot fitness use. It was not large, 40 feet of rubberized flooring, a rack of free weights along the west wall, 2 heavy bags that had been there since the 70s, and a set of mirrors along the north side that made the room look twice as deep as it was. 31 people were in that room on that afternoon. 9 of them were production crew on a break from a set 2 buildings over. 6 were personal trainers who rented the facility on weekday afternoons. The remaining 16 were martial artists, stuntman, and 1 retired tournament referee who had followed the conversation into the building because he could not quite believe what he was hearing. The man at the center of it was 39 years old that November, 6 feet 2 inches. 227 pounds of muscle that had been built and rebuilt across 2 decades of Aikido, Judo, and an on-screen persona so calculated and so relentless that it had begun, in certain rooms, to be mistaken for the real thing. Steven Seagal had 23 feature film credits by that point. 3 of them had crossed $100 million at the domestic box office. He had been on the cover of Black Belt magazine 4 times. He had told interviewers, on record, that he had trained CIA operatives and that his Aikido was, in his own precise and unqualified words, the most lethal fighting system currently in civilian use anywhere in the world. He believed it. That was the thing that the 31 people in that room would discuss for years afterward. He was not performing. He was not posturing in the way that actors sometimes posture when they want a story to carry. He had walked into the gymnasium that afternoon genuinely certain of something, and that certainty was the only flaw he carried, because in every other respect the man was formidable. His Aikido was technically impeccable. The stuntman in the room had all worked with him. They did not think he was pretending, but the other man in the room that afternoon was 51 years old. He was sitting on a bench near the free weights when Seagal came in, wearing a gray t-shirt and dark denim jeans and a pair of running shoes that had logged enough miles that the left heel had begun to separate from the sole. He had a paper coffee cup in his right hand, and he was reading something on a small notepad, and he did not look up for the first 40 seconds after Seagal entered the room. Nobody in that gymnasium, not the 9 production crew, not the 6 trainers, not the 16 martial artists and stuntman, and the 1 retired referee, knew they were about to watch something they would describe to their students for the next 30 years. In the next 18 seconds, with 4 movements, Steven Seagal would receive the only answer to the only warning he had been given. He would not be ready for it. He could not have been ready for it. Stay with this to the end, because the sentence that was spoken on that floor afterward, quietly, so that only 1 other person in the room could hear it, would be repeated in dojos from Osaka to Oklahoma City for the rest of that decade. And the man who heard it has never disputed a single word. Seagal had not come to the gymnasium looking for that man specifically. He had come in the way he always came into rooms in that period of his life, with the assumption that the room would reorganize itself around his presence. He had been in a conversation in the corridor with a stunt coordinator named Raymond Holt, and the conversation had moved inside and other people had joined it, and it had become the kind of conversation that gets louder as it goes. The topic was real combat, not film choreography, not controlled demonstrations. What worked, Seagal was saying, when the structure was gone and the distance was wrong and there was no referee and no understanding between the 2 men about how it would stop. What worked then? He had a list of things that did not work. Traditional karate, Sudo, competition point fighting. The reflexes trained in tournament settings, he said, were not only useless in real situations but were actively dangerous, because they produced responses that assumed a cooperative partner. The man on the bench near the free weights set down his notepad. He did not say anything yet. He picked up his paper coffee cup and finished what was in it, and placed the cup on the floor beside the bench with a care that seemed slightly out of proportion to the act. Raymond Holt, who was standing nearest to the bench, would say later that he felt the temperature in the room change at that moment. He could not explain it technically. He said it was the way the air changes before rain, when the pressure shifts and the light goes flat. Seagal had not finished. He was talking about Aikido now. He was talking about the mechanical efficiency of joint manipulation at close range, about the way his specific training addressed the 3 distances at which real confrontations happened, about the fact that what he did, when stripped of the film choreography, was not a martial art in the traditional sense but a violence management system derived from the battlefield protocols of feudal Japan and refined over 20 years of serious personal practice. The man on the bench stood up. He did not do it quickly. He set his feet on the floor, placed both hands on his knees, and stood the way a man stands when his knees have been asked to do a great deal over the course of many years. He was not large, 5 feet 10 inches, 174 pounds. He was wearing the gray t-shirt and the jeans and the running shoe with the separating heel, and his hands were at his sides, and the only thing he said, in a voice that was not loud enough to reach the far wall, was this: "Stephen, one thing worth saying before this goes further." Seagal looked at him, not dismissively, not with contempt, with the particular expression of a man who is calibrating how seriously to take the interruption. He did not take it seriously enough. "Whatever you are about to say," he said, "say it to someone who needs to hear it." The retired referee, whose name was Gerald Okamoto, and who had officiated at 4 national championships between 1979 and 1988, would say afterward that he had been watching the wrong man. He had been watching Seagal, because Seagal was the one speaking. But the moment the warning was declined, he looked at the man in the gray t-shirt, and he understood immediately that the conversation had already ended. Everything that followed was paperwork. If you have ever watched a confrontation build in a room where experienced people are present, you know that there is a specific quality to the silence that comes after the last opportunity to stop it has passed. It is not dramatic. It is not tense in the way tension is portrayed on film. It is more like a clock stopping. It is a silence in which everyone present is recalibrating what they thought they understood about the afternoon. That silence lasted approximately 4 seconds. If you want to know what happened inside those 4 seconds, and inside the 18 seconds that followed them, make sure you are subscribed and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. Because the version of this story that has been passed down through gyms and tournaments and late conversations in airport hotels does not carry the level of detail that the people who were in that room have shared. And that detail matters. Chuck Norris had not been in a competition since 1974. He had retired from tournament karate with a record that included 6 consecutive world professional middleweight karate championship titles, and a ranking that placed him, in the considered opinion of people who had watched him compete, in a category that contained very few names. He had spent 17 years in front of cameras since then, and the cameras had served him well. But there was a thing that happened sometimes, in rooms where the subject of real fighting came up among people who should have known better, where his name was treated as a credential that had expired. He did not correct it. He never corrected it. He folded the small notepad twice, and placed it in his back pocket. He did not remove his jacket, because he was not wearing one. He stood at a distance from Seagal of approximately 11 feet, which is a specific distance, a deliberate distance, the distance from which a trained man can read everything he needs to read without committing to a line of approach. A fight is not 2 men colliding. A fight is a series of decisions about space, each one made in a fraction of the time it takes to read this sentence. The man who controls the distance controls the fight, not the outcome. The fight. The outcome is what the distance produces. Norris did not move for 3 seconds. He simply stood and looked at a point approximately 2 inches to the left of Seagal's right shoulder, which is not where you look if you want the other person to know where you are looking, but is exactly where you look if you want to see everything that is about to move. Raymond Holt, who had been a stuntman for 11 years, and had worked with 12 actors who presented themselves as serious martial artists, said he had never seen anyone stand so still. Not still in the way of hesitation, still in the way of a thing that is already decided. Second 1. Seagal moved. He closed the distance in 1 step and brought his right hand forward in the initial contact motion of an Aikido entry, the hand that goes to the wrist or the sleeve, the hand that begins the redirection. It was technically correct. It was exactly what his training had produced in exactly the situation his training had anticipated. It did not connect, Norris had stepped offline, not backward. Not to the side in the way a retreating man steps. He had moved at an angle of approximately 45 degrees off the line of approach, which put him in a position that Seagal's entry had not accounted for, because the entry was designed for a man who was standing where Norris had been standing, and Norris was no longer there. Second 2. Seagal adjusted. His adjustment was fast. The people in that room who had worked with him agreed on that point without exception. His adjustment was fast and it was technically grounded, and it would have worked against almost anyone in that room. It did not work. Norris had changed the geometry again. He had not struck. He had not grabbed. He had simply moved a second time in such a way that Seagal's second entry found the same absence that the first one had found. Gerald Okamoto had both hands flat on his thighs. He was not watching the technique. He was watching Seagal's eyes. He could see, he said later, the precise moment when Seagal's certainty began to ask itself a question. Second 3. Seagal threw something with commitment. It was not a tentative motion, it was a full rotation movement, the kind that carries the body behind it, the kind that requires the other man to be approximately where you expected him to be. Norris was not there, he was inside it. He had moved forward and to the left in the window between the initiation of the throw and its arrival, which is not a window that exists if you have not trained to see it for a very long time, and his left hand made contact with Seagal's right forearm at a point approximately 4 inches above the wrist, and the pressure he applied there was not large. It did not need to be large. It only needed to be placed in the right direction at the right moment, and what it produced was a redirection of Seagal's own rotation that took Seagal's center of gravity past the point where his feet could recover it. Seagal went down on his left knee. He did not fall. He was not thrown. He went down on one knee, which is the specific and honest way to describe what his body did when it ran out of balance, and he stayed there for a moment that lasted, depending on who you asked, between 2 and 4 seconds, though Gerald Okamoto said he thought it was longer. The time had changed texture in the room. The 9 production crew members did not move. The 6 trainers did not move. The 16 martial artists and stuntman did not move. Raymond Holt, who was standing nearest to the bench where Norris had been sitting, let out a breath that he had apparently been holding since second 1 and had not noticed. Norris did not step back. He did not extend his hand immediately. He stood where he was and let the moment be what it was for a count of 2, and then he reached down with his right hand, open, palm up, at the height of Seagal's shoulder. Seagal looked at the hand. There are 2 ways a man can look at a hand extended to him from that position in that context. Both of them are a choice. Both of them are a declaration about who he intends to be on the other side of the next 10 seconds. Seagal took the hand. Norris helped him to his feet. They stood at close range for a moment. Norris said something. His voice was at a volume that was not intended to carry, and it did not carry. Not to the far wall, not to the production crew, not to the trainers, or the stuntman. Raymond Holt was close enough to hear the cadence, but not the words. Gerald Okamoto was 2 steps farther, and heard nothing. What Norris said has been reported differently by different people across 3 decades. But the man who heard it has confirmed the substance of it, and the substance was not complicated. It was 4 short sentences. It acknowledged what Seagal had built. It acknowledged that what he had built was real and earned and significant. And it said, plainly, that the thing he had built was not the same thing as what he had claimed it to be. Those are different things, and knowing the difference matters more than almost anything else a man in his position could know. Seagal did not say anything for a moment. Then he nodded once. He did not smile. He did not offer any of the language that men sometimes offer in that position when they are trying to suggest that the outcome was closer than it was, or that a different version of events had been possible. He nodded once, and he picked up the jacket he had left over a folding chair near the door, and he left the room. The door closed behind him. The gymnasium was quiet for several seconds. Then Raymond Holt started to say something, and stopped. One of the trainers near the weight rack sat down on a bench. Gerald Okamoto looked at the place on the floor where Seagal had been, and then looked at the man in the gray t-shirt, and he walked across the room and put his hand on the man's shoulder and held it there, not as a gesture of congratulation, but as a gesture of confirmation. The way a man touches a wall he is not sure is real. Norris picked up his notepad from the bench. He picked up the empty paper coffee cup from the floor and set it on top of the weight rack. He walked to the fire door at the far end of the room and pushed it open, and the flat afternoon light came in across the floor, and he walked out into it without looking back. The door swung shut. The light kept falling on the rubberized flooring, indifferent and unchanged, as if nothing had been settled. The story moved the way stories move in that world, not through interviews or publications or official accounts, through phone calls between stuntmen, through quiet conversations in the corners of tournaments, through the thing a trainer says to a student who has confused confidence for competence, when the student is not quite ready to hear it but the trainer decides to say it anyway. By the end of 1992, the broad outline of the afternoon in Burbank was known in professional martial arts circles across 3 countries. By 1995, certain details had shifted, as details do. The crowd count grew, the duration of the confrontation contracted in some versions and expanded in others. One version had it lasting 40 seconds, another had it lasting 6. Gerald Okamoto, who had been there, said neither number was accurate, but he understood why the story compressed and why it expanded, because both things were happening in the same direction, toward the same point, which is what stories do when they are trying to tell the truth about something that cannot be measured in seconds. What did not change, across any version of the story told by anyone who had been in the room, was the hand extended and the single nod. Those 2 details remained constant, and if you understand why those 2 details are the ones that survived every version of the retelling, you understand the lesson of the afternoon better than any of the technical details can communicate. There are men who have built something real and spend their lives insisting it is something more than real. And there are men who have built something more than real and spend their lives not mentioning it. The distance between those 2 men is not a matter of skill, it is a matter of what you think the skill is for. Seagal continued making films. He continued training. He did not return to that gymnasium. He did not give interviews that referenced that afternoon in any form that has been preserved. Gerald Okamoto ran into him once at an industry event in 1996, and they spoke briefly about an unrelated subject, and neither man mentioned Burbank, because there was nothing left to say about it that had not already been said in 18 seconds on a rubberized floor, when the light was coming in flat and low across the San Fernando Valley. The lesson that Chuck Norris taught in that gymnasium was not about Aikido. It was not about tournament records or film credits or any of the things by which men in that world measured themselves against each other. It was about the warning, the one opportunity offered, plainly, before anything happened, at a volume calibrated precisely for the man it was aimed at. A man who knows what he knows does not need everyone in the room to know it. He says it once, at the right volume, to the right person. What happens after that is the other man's choice. Next week, we will talk about the night in Las Vegas when Mike Tyson walked into a dojo looking for a demonstration, and the thing that happened 40 minutes later that the promoter refused to put in the official incident report. That story has not been told in full. We are going to tell it.